The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Thank you, Tally Olson. I am back. You are comfortably zoned with me, the Zigzag Man, in Alameda, California, right across the bay from San Francisco, across the moat, actually, from Oakland. They have an official moat now. You can't get into Alameda without it. And I have a guest who is an Alamedan. Jerry Feitelberg, you have joined us so many times over the years and enriched the network and my program in particular. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ralph. And first of all, Isla heard what you said, wishing her that for a speedy recovery and your well wishes, and she thanks you for that. And I thank you for having me on the program. And sometimes I get a little long-winded, but that's part of my persona.
Well, I'd rather be long-winded than short-winded and be a podcaster. Let me tell you.
Yeah, that's so true.
All right. We're waiting for your guest. Tell me his name, and we're going to talk about Lovin' baseball when we were 12 and innocent. How'd you meet the guest?
Win Derman. His name is Win Derman, and when we met, we had mutual friends. And we met about 10 years ago, and then I found out that Win went to the same high school that I went to in Boston, and he was 2 years ahead of me at the Boston Latin School, the oldest public school in the country, established in 1635. And currently it's 388 years, and in 12 years we'll be celebrating its 400th birthday. So.
Wow.
So we had a lot to talk about because it was an all-male school. Although we didn't have any mutual friends, we had a lot of the teachers that were the same. So we had a lot to talk about and what the school meant to us over the years. Win, after graduation, went to MIT. He's not a scientist. I think he got a degree in economics from MIT, and he worked with Visa for many, many years. And he's a huge Red Sox fan.
I think Win has joined us. Am I correct?
Yes, you are.
Oh, Win, there you are.
Nice to meet you officially. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too, Ralph. It's been a bit of a trouble getting through all this stuff, but we finally managed it.
Oh, good. That's the main thing. Let's get to baseball a little bit, if Jerry doesn't mind. I've entitled the podcast, Lovin' Baseball When We Were 12 and Innocent. And let me ask you a question. When you were 12, what year was it, baseball-wise?
Well, unfortunately, it was 1948.
Ah. Well, fortunately, let's put it that way. 1948 was Boston and Cleveland. Am I correct?
Yes, it was. But actually, my first memory goes 2 years earlier, if I could do that one.
Sure.
I found the Red Sox somehow. I have no idea. I was listening to WHDH one day, and they were talking in this gibberish, and I didn't understand quite what it was. But I found an older guy who told me, that's the Boston Red Sox and it's the broadcast and all that. And the next thing I knew, I was totally hooked on the season. And I fell totally in love with Ted Williams. Oh, my God, Ted Williams I wanted to play left field for the Red Sox and wear number 9. So the Red Sox get to the World Series, and I think, this is terrific. My God, there's a wonderful team. Everything is great. And, of course, you know what happened. A 7-game series with the Cardinals. And the story about this that I like to tell is when Enos Slaughter was on first base in the 8th inning. And I don't know how many of your people are going to remember this, but for me, it's been indelibly engraved in my brain. The score was tied, and Enos Slaughter was on first base. Just before that, Dom DiMaggio had pulled a muscle. He was the Red Sox center fielder, and they took him out of the game, and Lee Culberson went in to play center field. So Slaughter started stealing second base, and the hitter hit the ball into center field on a line, and it fell in, and Culberson got the ball. Slaughter's running to third base. Johnny Pesky gets the relay from Culberson and takes 2 steps towards home plate. And all of a sudden he notices that Slaughter is rounding third and going home, and he throws home too late. Slaughter scores the run. And then Harry the Cat Burkeen came in to shut the Red Sox off in the 9th inning. Game over, season over, series over, and they lost. Now, the corollary to the story is several years later, I had a chance to meet Johnny Pesky, and I literally would not shake the hand that held the ball that cost the Red Sox the World Series. Now, after I had done that stupid thing, I suddenly realized, it really wasn't Johnny Pesky's fault, because everybody is screaming in St. Louis, and Johnny Pesky is getting the relay throw from Culberson and has no idea that the Slaughter is trying to run home from third base. It was the job of Bobby Dorr to yell out to him, home, 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 and he didn't do it, or else not loud enough, and Pesky didn't know. So I blamed him by accident. Now, the corollary to the corollary is I told that story to a friend of mine that I was playing racquetball with, and he said to me, do you realize that my last name is Dorr, and Bobby Dorr was my first cousin? Oh. So that was my first introduction as a kid to the Red Sox.
Wow. Let me give you a little side note to that on a personal note. I was the Topps baseball card representative on the West Coast between 1980 and the 1990s. And one of the players I signed in the minors was named Culbertson, and he was
Lee Culberson.
Might have been.
Lee Culberson played for the Red Sox.
He started out with the Giants. I remember that for sure. Yeah. And I signed him, and one of my Facebook friends, which doesn't mean he's my friend, but he's my friend, along with 5,000 other folks on Facebook, many of whom I recognize. And there's a Culbertson on that, and he's the grandson of that Culbertson. And if I'm not mistaken, he would have gotten the throw into Pesky sooner.
That's probably true, because the center fielder wasn't that used to being out there. He had no chance to warm up, and his throw wasn't bad. It wasn't bad. Pesky caught it on the line. It was no problem. It's just that Pesky didn't realize he should have thrown it instead of holding it in his glove.
Yeah, Slaughter was a hustler. Give him that.
Oh, was he ever? You know what really irritates me? His name appears in crossword puzzles all the time. And every time I see his name in a crossword puzzle, I cringe and remember how I felt as I listened to the broadcast that he scored the winning run.
Yeah, well, traditionally, crossword puzzles all got together one time and said, who is 3 down? And it was OTT.
Yeah, right.
Every time you see a crossword puzzle, there's a Melot.
That's it.
In there.
Those two are the most common for crossword puzzles.
Yes.
Thankfully, I'm not in there. It would be 10 letters.
Right. Well,
so you got the story from me that when I was 10. Do you want the story from 12?
Sure.
Okay, I have another story, unfortunately, that's in the same ilk. and it was when I was 12 years old. Now, I have to tell your listeners that I'm Jewish, and I was in an Orthodox family when I was growing up, and it happened that the Red Sox were going to play Cleveland a playoff game in 1948 because they tied in the regular season, and they were playing at Fenway Park. And it was on Yom Kippur, which is the highest holiday in the Jewish religion. Now, what do? I'm 12. I want to listen to the game, but I'm supposed to be religious that day. On the other hand, I had not been 13, so I really wasn't considered a man. And therefore, theoretically, I didn't have to celebrate the holiday. A friend of mine lived a few blocks away, and he said to me, "Come on, I'm going to go home and listen to the game on the radio. Come on with me." And I went. Now, those of you who are listening remember in 1984, Lou Boudreau got 4 doubles. Cleveland won 8-4. 1948. He got 4 doubles, and they won 8-4. And Denny Galehouse had been the starting pitcher. Now, there's a name that's infamous in Red Sox history because Denny Galehouse was older than God. And the reason why he started the game after I think it was McNamara was the manager, and they asked him afterwards, why did you start?
It was Joe McCarthy.
Joe McCarthy, you're right, thank you. Joe McCarthy, and they asked him, why did you start him? And McCarthy gave the infamous answer, which is so stupid you can't believe it. He says, I was saving my 2 25-game winners, Kinder and Parnell, for the first 2 games of the World Series. So they're still ready. Anytime they need to play the 1948 World Series, if they can dig them up, Kinder and Parnell can start the game.
And getting them warm will be quite a task. Let's put it that way.
Well, if I may make a comment, what was unique about the 1948 season was that the Boston Braves, whose stadium, if you can believe it, they had 2 teams in Boston in those days. Braves Field was just a mile away from Fenway Park.
Yeah.
But they didn't play on the same days. When the Braves are out of town, the Red Sox are in town.
Yeah.
But the Braves had not. The Braves have been a team of futility. They have just been a terrible team. Their last World Series was 1914 when they swept they were in last place on the 4th of July, and then they swept the Philadelphia Athletics. They came from behind, won the pennant in 1914, and then swept the powerful Philadelphia A's in the 1914 World Series, and then went 34 years, mostly as a second division team in those days. And they were managed by Casey Stengel, if you can believe it, in the early 40s.
Yep.
And finally after the war, Warren Spahn came back from the war, was pitcher they had Johnny Sain, and the Braves had Spahn and Sain and Pray for Rain, and they also had Vern Bickford on the team.
Yeah.
And they had players like Phil Macy, their catcher, Earl Torgerson, Sibby Sisti. Their third baseman was Bob Elliott. Bob Elliott had been the MVP in the National League in 1947. And the Braves put it all together, and Tommy Holmes was in right field. Was their they used to have the jury box out in right field for the Braves. And I forgot the other outfielders, but the Braves finally put it together and won the World Series. And had the Red Sox won the pennant in the American League, it would have been the first time that they would actually have a Subway Series in the Boston area. And that's what made it so special.
Well, Jerry and I talked a little bit the other day, and of course the Braves became the Milwaukee Braves, and that didn't work out too well, so they become the Atlanta Braves. But I have one little soft spot in my heart for them. Again, when I was 12 in 1948, my cousin worked for the Braves running the turnstile to let people in. And he invited me one day to come to the game. And after the people had come in, we went up the ramp that was behind home plate. And I got to the top of the ramp, and I stood there and looked at the baseball field for the first time. And it was magnificent. My God, I'd never seen anything so big and green and terrific. And just as I stepped in, somebody at the plate swung his bat, hit a ground ball, to the illustrious Sibby Sisti, who threw to first for an out. And that was my first introduction to live baseball.
Wow.
And if you remember back in the days, in those days, in the 1940s, Fenway Park only 32,000 people could get into the park.
Right.
And Braves Field held at least 40,000. It was a much bigger park, had bigger dimensions than Fenway, and it was just different. And for me as a kid, it was just as easy to go to Fenway Braves Field because the streetcars would take you right to the front gate, and they'd be waiting for you after the game. And so for a young kid, you just come out, get on the streetcar, or take you to Park Street, and I take the train to Ashmont Station, and then you get the trolley for Mattapan Square, and then I walk home. And it was no big deal.
But in spite of all that, Jerry, you know the Braves were always second place in Boston. The Red Sox
they were
the team.
The Braves were the second team, no matter what they did. And you have to remember the attendance at Braves Field in 1952. Then in those days they played 77 home games rather than the 81 like they do now.
Right, 154-game season.
In 1952, the Braves for the entire season drew 281,000 people,
and that was a lot for them.
It was slightly over 3,000 people a game.
Yeah.
And they left in the spring of 1953 from Milwaukee, and the Braves became the first team in baseball to draw 2 million people in a season.
And you know why? One of the players they brought up the first year was Hank Aaron.
Henry Aaron to go along with Eddie Matthews, and then they
had these players that they had in the minors, and they didn't play them in the majors, and they go to Milwaukee, and all of a sudden the Braves were a reputable team.
Yeah, let me give you a little baseball trivia.
Yeah.
When Aaron broke in, it was because Bobby Thompson had broken his leg, and Aaron became the starting left fielder, or the right fielder, excuse me. When Willie Mays broke in, he took over for Bobby Thompson, the same Bobby Thompson. Yeah.
Do you remember what Willie Mays did when they brought him up? He did nothing. For 2 or 3 weeks, he couldn't get hits. He couldn't do anything. And all the New Yorkers were saying, "What did you do here?" And suddenly he got it together and had a magnificent career.
Yeah, his first hit, he was 0 for 21 or something like that. His first hit was a home run off Warren Spahn.
Yeah. It's amazing how he got it together so quickly.
And it's amazing how close their careers, Mays and Aaron, ran. Mays was the odds-on favorite to break Babe Ruth's record at one time.
Yeah.
And great game of baseball.
And would Ted Williams have done it if he hadn't been 5.5 years in the military.
That would have been close to 200 more home runs. And he ended up
easily.
He had
527.
Yeah, exactly. So, and Ted Williams couldn't draw his farewell any better. John Updike wrote about it. The kid bids Boston adieu, and in his last at bat at Fenway Park, what does he do? He hits a home run.
You know what?
That's a great story.
I went to that game. And I got there early. I counted about 10 or 15 rows. I can't even remember, up in the right field stands. And I said, Williams is going to hit a home run, and this is where it's going to land, and I'm going to catch it. Well, he hits the home run, and it went 10 or 15 rows up in the next section to where I was sitting.
Oh, no kidding. Wow.
Yeah, and I picked the wrong section, but the right row.
Well, back in those days, you probably could sit in the bleachers for what, 75 cents or $1,
50
something
cents.
like that.
50
cents.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, kids could go to the game. In those days, it was safe for the kids to travel on the streetcars, so you didn't have to worry. And they could go to see a game for 50 cents. Now, the bleachers are my dental hygienist. Yeah, he went to Boston a few years ago. It cost him $40 to sit in the bleachers, and it's much more. And it's more expensive even now. Even now, it's probably $50-$60 to sit in the bleachers.
Okay, I got another Ted Williams story. I worked for one of the banks in Boston, State Street Bank, the summer after my junior year in high school, and I was working in the check processing department. And all of a sudden, somebody yelled out, "Here's Ted Williams' paycheck." And we all rushed over to see if he was getting $2,000 in the paycheck, which would have given him $100,000 as a salary for the year. And it was $2,000. So he and Joe DiMaggio were the first $100,000 players.
Okay, what would those guys be worth today? If Mike Trout is making $37 million a year, would they be $45, $50 million a year guys?
Without doubt, no question about it.
Well, fortunately, they're saving Ted Williams' DNA, so maybe we'll.
Well, not only that, but they're saving his body and his head, so you never know.
Yeah, he's coming back.
Science is progressing to the point where they do unbelievable things, but we're not going to be here to see that.
No, that's true. Well, unless we preserve our bodies.
Well, I'm doing the best I can as we speak, as a matter of fact. No, I'm not.
Okay, I'm going to give you another Williams story. I'm full of Williams stories, but here's one that I absolutely loved. One day, one of the players was pitching against Ted Williams. I don't even remember who it was, but the pitcher pitched a ball that he thought was absolutely perfect, and he was called a ball. So the pitcher comes halfway to home plate, and he's arguing with the umpire, and the umpire looks at him and says, "Mr. Williams will let you know when it's a strike." He had 2015 vision.
Yeah, he was phenomenal.
He was phenomenal.
I have another little story that's kind of interesting. Are you familiar with Mo Berg?
Yeah, he was a catcher for Detroit, who was a spy.
For the Red Sox. He broke in. He actually broke in. Berg went to Princeton, and he graduated. And in those days, there weren't very many Jewish students at Princeton.
Yeah.
And both John McGraw wanted to sign him. He'd be a draw for the Giants, and the Dodgers also wanted to sign him. Well, he signed initially with the Giants and wrecked his knee. Ended up with the White Sox and I think he played for the Senators. And Joe Cronin loved him. Joe Cronin absolutely loved him. And he brought him to Boston. And Berg was the third straight catcher in Boston. But he'd be out in the bullpen and he'd be working with the pitchers. And Ted Williams loved him. And the reason was, Williams was a student of the pitchers. When Pesky and DiMaggio would go up to bat, and if they made it out, they'd come back to the dugout, and Williams would say, "What was the pitch that got you out?" Or what was he throwing you? And if they didn't know, he'd be mad at them for not knowing the pitches. Yeah. But Berg was a student of the game, and he knew what the pitchers were throwing. And Ted used to tap into his knowledge for information. And, of course, Berg was the spy, and there's a great book, if you ever read it, The Catcher Who Was a Spy. Yeah. And he's just a real character. He just has so many quirks. He roomed with Dom DiMaggio.
Yeah.
And they
got along very well.
He used to read 10 newspapers a day. And Dom DiMaggio made the mistake of picking up a newspaper before Berg read it. Bird took the paper, threw it on the ground, and said, "The paper is dead." So Dom said, "I've had it. I'm moving out."
So I got a story that came to mind about Mel Allen. You all know Mel Allen was a broadcaster for the Yankees. And I never listened to him.
Melvin Allen, Israel.
Yeah.
Speaking of being Jewish.
Right. And so I never had a chance to listen because I was with Jim Britt in Boston. He was the announcer with Bump Hadley. But the story went, some friend of mine was from New York. He said, here's a story about Mel Allen. He's broadcasting the game, and somebody hits a line drive deep to right field. Gene Woodling, who's the right fielder, goes racing back, leaps, and catches the ball before he hits the wall. And Mel Allen says, there's that Gene Woodling, the most underrated ball player in the league. And the next guy comes up and hits a simple pop-up out at the right field. Allen says, Woodling runs in, taps his glove, and drops the ball. There's that Gene Woodling, the most overrated, underrated ball player in the league.
Well, we're lucky. I grew up in New York. We were lucky. We had the three best announcers I've ever heard, all told. Phil Rizzuto, Red Barber, and Mel Allen, all announcing for the Yankees at the same time in the 50s after Red Barber left the Dodgers.
Didn't you miss somebody?
How about Vin Scully? He was there
How
with
about
the Dodgers.
Vin Scully, who, without a doubt, is one of the all-time greatest announcers? And you had him in Brooklyn. New York could pay enough money that they could get the best of the best.
Yeah, I have a story. I have a story to tell you. The first time I had an encounter with Vin Scully, I was up in the media lounge at the San Francisco Giants. The Giants were playing the Dodgers, and I was in there, and I had gotten my dinner, and I'm walking over to the table, and Vin was coming the other way. And he looked up and said, "Hi, how you doing?" And he didn't know me, and I said, "Great, how are you?" And then the second time was about 10 years ago. The Dodgers were in town to play the A's for 3 games, and where he worked was about 2 seats to my right in the press box, and I had the great pleasure of spending time with him and talking to him for 3 straight days. It was just amazing. He was the most gracious person. He may not have known your name, but he would listen to you and talk to you, and he was always a gentleman.
And he was an original New York Giant fan. They called him. He
went to Fordham, and in 1947 he played against Yale. And in the box score, you see George H.W. Bush's name in there, and on the opposing team was Ben Scully.
Wow.
Great names out of the past. Absolutely great names.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, Win. Everybody talks about baseball when we were growing up, this, that, and the other thing. And there are all kinds of reasons not to like everything that's going on about baseball in today's game. Yeah. What is it that you like about changes in today's game? Is there anything at all that you can see? You go to a game. What is it you like?
That is a terrific question because the game has changed so dramatically because of money. I mean, the salaries are astronomical. When a player came up in the old days, you knew you could follow his entire career because he was reserved. His contract had a reserve clause that says he was automatically going to play for them the next year if the club wanted it. So that reserve clause kept the players for their entire career. There were no trades. People weren't let go that often. They played their careers and then they went away. Well, now you can't get close to any of the players mentally because they're not in the same team long enough. And the kids today have lost the opportunity to really have heroes. That's the part I don't like. The part I do like is it's on television every day. And except for people like Jerry who are kind enough to make tickets available, sometimes I don't bother going to the games because I can see on television as good or better than I could at the ballpark.
Well, you have to remember when the great Jerry Seinfeld on one of his shows said he addressed that problem and says, you don't root for the players anymore, you just root for the uniform.
Yeah, that's exactly the problem. And it's a loss for the kids. That's what really gets me. Because I grew up at 10, I could tell you every batting average of every player every day. I followed it like it was the religion, for goodness sake. It was phenomenal, and I knew the players were going to be there for years, so I could like them and follow them.
Yeah, I was talking with Hal Ramey yesterday. Hal's been a broadcaster on KCBS for many, many years, and we were lamenting the fact that the newspapers now, the Red Sox only had one reporter at the game. They used to have 3 or 4 reporters. The Yankees had only one. If you're fortunate enough to get a real newspaper, in the old days they'd have the standings, they would have the top 10 hitters in each league, the leaders in runs batted in, home runs, pitching, all the stats. They don't exist anymore.
No, they don't.
The Los Angeles Times stopped printing the box scores. Yep. They're not doing that anymore.
The San Francisco Chronicle doesn't even put anything in there anymore. After having the Chronicle as my paper since 1961, I finally dropped it. I said, you're not putting any sports. Who needs you?
Exactly.
Yeah. I'm sure you remember the great Nick Peters was very popular in the early 60s. What's changed in baseball that you're surprised you liked? How about that?
I believe it or not, I actually am liking the pitch count because the game was getting too boring when there were so many delays. Pitchers would take forever. They'd throw to first base 10 times. It was not worth watching the games. And now I believe that they've made some really good strides on speeding it up. And it's not just speeding it up. They've made the game continuous as opposed to waiting for the pitcher to make a decision to throw a pitch.
Well, I like the elimination of the shift. The players are now show their athletic ability. You're getting hits up the middle. Left-hand hitters are getting hits into right field.
Yep.
And I like the bigger bag, and you're seeing a lot of more running and stolen bases. You're seeing bunts again. It's really making baseball fun again.
Yeah,
these guys.
Right.
Remember when we were kids, they used to play a game called Pepper. They don't do that anymore, and they're so intent in hitting home runs. But when you play Pepper, you put the bat on the ball, and we used to have hitters, that were spray hitters, guys like Nellie Fox, guys like Rod Carew, Tony Gwynn. They had great back control, and they could get hits. And Johnny Pesky used to have 200 hits a year.
Every year, that's right.
Yeah, those guys, and the first 2 hitters in the lineup were the setup guys, and then the big guns would come up. The 3, 4, and 5 hitters would come in and knock the runs in. When the Red Sox had Ted Williams and Junior Stevens, and these guys. I mean, one year, I think Williams and Stevens drove in 300 runs between the 2 of them. They were. You know
what happened that year? The Red Sox had traded for Stevens from the St. Louis Browns, who became the Orioles, the Baltimore Orioles. Stevens was not a great hitter, but he could hit high fly balls. And he only had to hit it 315 yards to reach the left field wall at Fenway Park, but he had to hit it 30 feet in the air. I think it was 37 feet was the height of the wall.
That's right.
And he could hit these pop-up fly balls that he'd catch the 37-foot screen. And he was phenomenal that year. He and Williams were just untouchable. They kept driving in runs.
Well, that's the magic of Fenway Park, because at Fenway Park, guys hit line drives that would be home runs in any other park, and they go for a single. They're just a single off the wall. They get out there, bounce off the wall, and the left fielder throws it into second base. So the guy goes single.
Yep. But the fly balls would make the net.
Yeah, for people who have never been to Fenway Park, it's a wonderful experience. It's a true baseball experience. Absolutely. You get there before you get out there on Yawkey Way. They have all kinds of things going on before the game, during, and going in there and sitting in Fenway Park, where the stadium is 112 years old, and just being there, the green grass, the big wall, and the pesky pole in right field. Yeah, it's really great. The bad thing about Fenway Park is that the seats are very narrow, and sometimes, if you're unfortunate, you get a seat behind the pole, which is terrible. But it's a wonderful experience to go to Fenway Park. I remember when we were there, they didn't have the Yawkey Way with all this stuff, but they used to have a guy, and he used to come by Latin school. The guy had a little cart where he'd sell peanuts, and you get a bag of fresh roasted peanuts, huge bag, for 10 cents. And then if you go into the park, they were selling a smaller bag for a quarter. So everybody would get the peanuts from the guy outside. Right. And of course, in those days, you didn't have to go through metal detectors or any of that stuff. You just walked into the ballpark.
So, Jerry, you know how much I paid for 2 bottles of water and a bag of peanuts yesterday?
Let's see, $15.
$33.
Oh gosh!
And this is with the A's, where nobody goes to the game.
That's outrageous.
It's outrageous.
Repeat that. How much did you pay for that?
$33.
Holy shit! That's crazy.
I mean, it was crazy. Absolutely crazy.
Are you sure it wasn't? Are you sure it wasn't holy water you were getting?
Well, plenty of holy water in Boston, I'll tell you that.
That's true.
Good, bad, or indifferent. Hey, guys, terrific show. Jerry, I want you to take us out.
No, wait. Before he does that, I got one more little story. I saved it for the end. When I was 10 years old, I was in a class with a guy who was a little older than I was, like 4 years, because it was a Hebrew school class. And we got to talking about baseball, and the guy says to me, "Do you want Ted Williams' autograph?" Oh, would I love Ted Williams' autograph. He grabs a piece of paper and a pen, and he writes Ted Williams. He says, "Do you want Bobby Doerr's autograph?" I said, "Yeah, I like Bobby Doerr." The next thing I knew, he's writing all these autographs from all the players on the Red Sox. And the funny part of the story is, I sold my house a couple of years ago. Now, we're talking about 75 years ago. I found that piece of paper with all of the signatures on it. It had nothing to do with the players. It had to do with this guy Bocus, whatever his name was. And I believed it at first that I had Ted Williams' autograph. So there's one more little piece. I play racquetball with a guy who's terrific, really a guy, and he saves baseball cards and stuff like that. One day he gives me a baseball card signed by Ted Williams, and this was legit. About 2 years go by, and he gives me he brings in a paper bag, and he gives it to me. And I was joking around. I said, "What are you giving me this time? A baseball?" I opened it up, and there was a baseball with Ted Williams' autograph. And I said, "Tommy, you can't give me this." He says, "My son doesn't care at all, and I know how much you care for it, so I want you to have it." It's sitting in my front hall right now, and I look at it every day when I walk out.
Nice. Very nice. Any Bill Russell story from you guys before we leave? We're off the subject of baseball, but Boston, you can't talk Boston without talking Bill Russell.
I'm going to give you one quick story, so Jerry can think for a minute. I went to the game one time, and of course Boston Garden was old and crappy and all that, and when you entered, it was a small entryway, and it was always full of people. So one day I'm in there waiting to go into the stadium, and all of a sudden Bill Russell is walking in through the crowd. And it's not easy to see him. You know, he's 6'10", and you see him going. And he came right by me, and he was walking with his wife, Rose, and she was 5 feet tall, and he had his hand on her head, guiding her through the crowd.
Oh, what a great story.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. How about you, Jerry? What comes to mind when I mentioned Bill Russell?
Well, I was fortunate enough to see Bill Russell play many, many times. My brother was a huge Boston Celtic fan. My brother was not a big sports fan. He used to tell me, "Why do you root for the Red Sox? You're going to break your heart." I don't know. And they did until 2004.
Right.
And the snow was broken, and we've had 4 world championships in this century. And
you know something? They only should win 3 times in a century on average because there's 30 teams.
Yeah. Well, another thing that's interesting is that the Yankees have won 40 pennants and 27 world championships. But the 2 teams that are next in the American League, I think both the Red Sox and the A's have won 13 or 14 pennants. Both teams have 9 championships. They're second in the American League.
Yeah.
And so, it's just an amazing. Boston happens to be one of the best sports towns in the country. The people love the Red Sox. They for years, the Boston Bruins, no matter how good or how bad the team was, they used to sell our old Boston Garden, and the Garden held for hockey in those days 13,909 fans.
Yeah.
It's a very easy number to remember.
Yeah.
And the Celtics, when they started back in, they were formed around 1946 or 47. Walter Brown was the owner. And they had a guy. They started to get good when they brought Red Auerbach in to coach the team around 1950.
Yeah.
And they had 3 great stars: Bill Sharman, Bob Cousy, and Easy Ed McCauley. But they weren't going anywhere. And Auerbach realized he had heard about Bill Russell, and they had scouted him. And they traded McCauley to the St. Louis Hawks for the first round draft choice, and they drafted Bill Russell. And the rest is history. Russell played 13 years, and they won 11 championships in 13 years.
Wait a minute. They gave away Easy Ed McCauley, and they gave away
Cliff Hagan.
2 more players. I'm trying to remember. It was Cliff Hagan. Yeah, Cliff Hagan.
Yeah.
From Kentucky.
Yeah.
And a draft choice.
And they would have won another World Championships in 1958, but Russell injured his ankle, and they lost to the St. Louis Hawks, which they would have beat easily. And then the only other year was 1967, when Wilt Chamberlain had a great supporting cast, and they finally won a championship. But I was fortunate enough.
Well, Magic Johnson didn't help us either.
No, that was in the 80s. That was a different time.
Yeah, that's right. It's a different crew.
I was very fortunate to see. I went to the first time that Bill Russell met Wilt Chamberlain in a game. I sat up in the second back lane and back of the broadcasters where Johnny Most used to sit, and it was quite an experience because Chamberlain was a magnificent athlete. He was 3 or 4 inches taller than Russell.
Yeah.
He was a great. He was a track athlete. There was nothing that Wilt Chamberlain couldn't do, but he couldn't beat Russell. Russell had his number.
He had his number. Thank goodness.
And Russell used to create chaos in Chamberlain's mind, because they would ask Chamberlain, "Does Bill Russell hate you?" And he'd say, "No." "Does he like you?" "No." And Russell used to say, "I don't like him. I don't hate him. I just don't give a damn. I don't care about Wilt Chamberlain." And used to freak Chamberlain out. How can you care? One of the great athletes of all time.
Yeah. Listen, the NBA was so bad. You mentioned a lot of that. $13,999 in Boston Garden. Do you remember when they started? They used to play some of their games at Boston Arena, which had 5,000 seats, and they never filled the arena.
Yeah,
in the early days, nothing.
They used to play in Hartford, and I think they went to Providence, wherever they could. And then
that's right.
And then to get people in the stands, they used to have double headers. They'd have two NBA games. And the double headers weren't the Celtics. They bring in two NBA teams, like the Chicago Bulls or the Lakers,
Syracuse.
whatever. Yeah, or playing Syracuse, exactly.
Yeah.
And just to get people into the park. It wasn't until the Bird and the Larry Bird and the Magic that then the Celtics became as popular as they are. And of course,
and not only the Celtics, but the league in total. I mean, those two guys really made the league.
Yeah, you remember they used to tape the NBA Finals and have them on tape delay and then show it late at night. It's not like now where ABC shows them, live. So it's totally different.
And pays a huge amount of money for them.
Yeah, we talked about salaries. Can you believe? I don't know how much Bill Russell made in those days. He was probably $100,000 a year player.
Yeah.
But this year, Steph Curry is going to make $51.9 million in salary.
You don't even know the half of it. Wait till 2 years from now when the betting money starts coming into the NBA, and that has to be divided 50-50 between the owners and the players.
Yeah,
the salaries are going to go astronomical in 2 years.
Yeah, and that's only part of Steph's income. I think he gets $25 million a year from Under Armour and all those other. He's making between $94, $95, and $100 million a year.
You know what I say? He's worth it. He is one of a kind. He's absolutely terrific as a person and as a player.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you, last year at a day game, late in August of last year, we were there, and I see Steph and Aisha down on the field, and what they did, Steph paid for 1,000 kids from Oakland. He has this foundation. He brought them to the game. He brought 1,000 kids to the game.
Yeah.
And then Steph and Aisha threw out the first pitch, and then the little vans came and took him out, and I thought he was gone for the day. Well, and it was now about the fourth inning, and I had to use the restroom, and I'm walking over there, and Steph is in the TV booth. And I go running back to the guys, and I say, guys, Steph is in the TV booth, and we can see him. If we lean forward, we can see him talking to the TV guys at that time.
Yeah.
So, and then after the game, the kids were allowed to run the bases, and Steph was down with them. He was high-fiving them, and then he, as they all went by, he fived every one of them, and then he grabbed a couple kids and ran the bases with them too.
Yeah. Wow.
What a guy! I mean,
he is a real wonder.
Yeah,
wonderful
he's wonderful.
Person.
Yep.
Hey,
so,
guys, we're short of time.
Other than that, we don't have much to say.
Right. Like I say, it's been a pleasure, Win. What's your last name? I forgot.
Derman, D as in David, E-R-M-A-N.
Beautiful. Thank you, sir. It's been great. Jerry, you're a terrific producer.
I have one suggestion, Ralph.
Yes.
The next time we have our lunch at the golf course with Eric and George Spanos, let's expand it and invite Win.
Beautiful. Where are you living, Win?
I live in Menlo Park, but I go anywhere for a good day.
Beautiful.
Okay, Ralph, I'm going to ask you one favor. Send me your email, and I'm going to invite you to be on my website. I go and I broadcast an hour on a Tuesday evening after I record it during the day, so it's convenient for my guests. And I have conversations with people that I meet. And I'd love to talk to you about your podcast and your background. So if you send me your email, I will forward to you an invitation email so that you can join my program. I'd love to have you on it.
I can't tell you how honored I am. Thank you very, very much. And
yeah, I've got it. I'll send it to you, Win, later today.
Okay, terrific. And I'll send you an invitation from the Win-Win Show, Made in America.
Win-win. I like that. It's a win-win show.
That's it.
Beautiful. Thank you, everybody, for listening as well. Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. I'm Ralph Tycho, the weak link of it all. And I just want to say adios and happy trails, everybody.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
The proceeding has been a Comfortably Zoned network production. You are advised to keep your dreams wet, your humor dry, your children and grandchildren out of military recruiting offices and off the laps of clerics who wear dresses. Thank you for listening, everyone. Happy trails.